been watching this, the leftists, the Democrats, the media, I repeat myself, they've been working overtime to somehow make what's happening in the Middle East Israel's fault. And they've completely forgotten why Israel declared war in the first place. These media folks, these leftists, these Democrats. And to see an ABC journalismer trying to shame an Israeli soldier about the number of Palestinians dying, bro, come on. Yeah, that's awful. So let's take a listen to it. Here's an ABC journalismer trying to shame this IDF soldier. He's an IDF member. Let's take a listen.
There are those voices there across this region and elsewhere who say the price of military action is too great, that too many civilians are now dying, too many Palestinians are already dying.
We're in a full war here, and the responsibility isn't on us. You should take that question straight back to Hamas. We are here because we have no other choice.
There are those voices.
Oh yeah, just leave it to a soldier to just give him a straight answer. Take that question back to Hamas. Hell yeah. Finally, leave it to the infantry to articulate the problem in plain text. See, when you have the right thing on when you have truth on your side, you don't need the fancy emotional words to make your point. They've all been obnoxious. It's not just ABC. ABC isn't special. They finally got called out by somebody who actually knows what's going on. And joining me here on the Patriot Power Plug Cities 92.9 to talk a little bit about it, Mike Koolidge. He is actually a former Army officer, which is why I kind of wanted to get your reaction to this, Mike. He had a syndicated radio show. That's the Mike Koolidge Show. He's the chairman of the Ogle County Republicans. He also works on the American Greatness podcast, which I am going to get to here in just a second. But first reaction to that clip I just played, Mike, ABC journalism are shaming an IDF soldier for the Palestinian deaths.
Yeah, I so much appreciate you using that term journalismer, because they're not journalists. They have a bias. They lay it out for the world to see repeatedly. And there's no sense of principles anymore in journalism, especially at the highest levels of, let's see where the facts lead us and report on the facts, whether or not it helps, one side or the other. There are clearly two sides in this war. It's a side of people who chop off the heads of babies, who killed innocent civilians intentionally at a party, at a rave, in order to spark this war. That side, Hamas, we're talking about, of course, is a side that uses human shields and has, hospitals and things right next to weapons caches, so that if they're targeted, they will kill their own people. I mean, they're the bad guys, if you really want to, explain this to a 5-year-old. So, but we've got this whole leftist world that runs so many things, not just in the media, but from the UN, the global perspective, that thinks that the Hamas people, the people who specifically are part of Hamas, they're terrorists. They're a terrorist organization. That they somehow, it's this, equal sort of, well, there's innocent people being killed there too. Well, yes, there are. There are people in Gaza who have been told numerous times to get the heck out of there as fast as possible, who are innocent. Yes, there are innocent Palestinians, but Hamas brought this war on. Israel's existence, we use terms like existential threat in the media all the time. The global climate, existential threat. The world's going to blow up in 8 years if we don't, reduce carbon emissions and all this stuff, which is not true. The world's going to be fine. Whereas Israel, it is absolutely 100% an existential threat. If Hamas gets what they want, and if they bring their allies into this war, Hamas's allies I'm talking about, and there's a lot of them, Israel's not going to exist if they have their way. And a reporter like this, a journalismer, is that what you said, journalismer? I like that term.
Yeah, journalismer. Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever they
not doing
are.
actual journalism.
I usually call them corporate journalismers.
Yeah, corporate
That's my
journalism,
full term.
the cultural elite. Yeah, there's all sorts of
But
things, but no, not journalists. That's not what that is. And there's a lot
one
of terrible
thing
journalism happening.
Yeah, but, one thing, and I'm not going to push back against you at all. I agree. I think that there are innocent people in Gaza. I wouldn't call them innocent Palestinians. I think that there is this, narrative definitely passed down from the White House. And I just played the clip of John Kirby essentially saying that we're going to be giving humanitarian assistance to both sides, Israel and Palestine. Palestine is not a country. There's Palestinian territories. When you're Palestinian, in Hebrew, it means invader. I think that people who are Palestinians have had children. They, have raised their children to not be an actual Palestinian. So that term Palestinian, I would say that there's Arabs, there's people in the Middle East that are not a part of this. I'm going to say Antifa like BLM like Palestinian, because that's what the Palestinians are. They're just dissenters. They're these people who create the autonomous zones in our country, like Chaz. They create
Yeah,
these
that's
like
fair.
little
I
territories.
mean,
And
yeah, and again, like we could call them, let's call them non-Israelis or
yeah.
non-Jews in Gaza.
Hmm.
There are people, not every single person who's not Jewish in Gaza is for Hamas and is backing
Yep.
Hamas. They will be collateral damage in this war, thanks to
Mhm.
Hamas, if they don't leave Gaza, if they don't find themselves a safer place than what these people who purport to speak for them
Mhm.
are telling them, what to do.
Mhm.
And yeah, but this comes down to back to to your original thing. These journalismers, they have to report on this factually. And the big story now in the last 24 hours, of course, is this hospital that so many of these mainstream corporate elite journalists and media jumped to the conclusion that, and including some sitting congressmen here in the United States, that Israel attacked this hospital with an airstrike and 500 people are dead. Immediately they jumped to that. They don't have a body count of 500. They don't have any, there's no facts to support that statement, but that's the
Mhm.
headline. And then sometimes they say Palestinians say at the bottom, and then that's dropped out in some of the other headlines. No, now we're finding out through actual hard evidence of people who track these things that there's zero evidence of any cratering, of any sort of thing that would be indicative of an airstrike. I've been in the Middle East in a building that was struck by an airstrike,
Mhm.
and you see it. I was in a building in Baghdad actually, where you could see the hole in the ceiling going all the way down to the bottom, a precision airstrike by the U.S. military actually, that you can only come from something from the air. There's nothing like that in the evidence they have of this hospital right now. The evidence points to it being an inherent rocket,
Misfire.
that happened from inside Gaza, and there's no
Yeah.
Israeli forces inside Gaza right now shooting, air to ground missiles. So you can't conclude in any way, shape, or form that this was Israel doing this, but the media, of course, will jump right to that conclusion. A
Yeah,
lot of
and,
people.
we know now, through evidence, right, that that's not factual, but it doesn't matter. They got their narrative out there,
Right.
before anybody else got the truth out there, so now people are gonna think that Israel blew up a hospital. Here was my initial reaction to it because I had just assumed that they blew up a hospital because war is ugly, okay? And if Israel blew up a hospital in response to them blowing up, paragliding in and slaughtering, raping women, cutting off the heads of children, right? I don't know. I would say that that's an appropriate response. Yes, that's awful. But war is ugly, and if they're playing war like, "Hey, we're gonna chop off the heads of babies," you know what I mean? Like, that was my initial reaction. If they did that, it's gruesome, it's terrible, and I'm not condoning it in any kind of sense. I don't want the war to be uh going on. It shouldn't be going on. It's Joe Biden's fault. Really, we didn't have this when Trump was president. But when I read that, I was like, and it's war. You know what I mean? I don't know. I know that's
Well,
awful, but if
well,
they're going to
no,
be
it was,
committing war crimes, then why wouldn't Israel be committing war crimes right back?
yeah, it goes back to the two different standards that, again, the media reporting on this has, that is, you know, one side, and we'll put our U.S. military, Western forces, and Israel in the same category. We go out of our way to develop weaponry for war that is as precise as I talked about. You know, back to
Mhm.
this
And as
palace of
it
Baghdad.
is humane
Yes,
as
it's
war
it's
could
as humane
possibly
as you
be.
can be. Like, we're specifically targeting military. Like, we have, and Israel has the ability to, if there is a hospital and they know that all of the Hamas people are congregating into one wing of it, and all the innocents on the other are on the other side, they have the technology to just hit the side in it that has Hamas with their, war. With their war headquarters or whatever, and I'm just using hypotheticals here, but they have
Mhm.
the, whereas Hamas and they're like, they go out of their way to kill civilians. And then the
Mhm.
media looks at something like this and says, okay, well, they just attacked the hospital, Israel. So look how evil they are, and so on. And then they blow that up and blow that up, figuratively. And yeah, there's two separate standards. Yes, war is awful. The Dresden bombings in World War II killed, thousands of innocents, that we bombed, the US bomb. Hiroshima and Nagasaki also killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people. Had we not done that, we would have bombed Tokyo too, which would have killed millions of people. We would have invaded Japan, which would have killed millions of people. War is the worst thing that humans do to each other, obviously. So if you can do things that prevent innocent people from dying in the future, yes, sometimes that calls for making calls about, attacking a place where we know the enemy. If we hit them, they're going to be unable to do worse things in the future. And yes, often, and when you have an enemy who is using civilians specifically as shields to do the propaganda war, when you do kill
Mm.
them, the bad guys, and innocent civilians are next to them, yeah, they're going to, of course, use that as propaganda, and that's happening. And yeah, this is going to get worse before it gets better. I can't remember.
Mm.
I don't know if we've been on 2 weeks, or if it's been 2 weeks since I've been on last, but I don't remember if I made this point when this first blew up. But the Nazis in World War II, when the concentration camps were revealed, they did everything they could to hide their atrocities. The Nazis, no, we weren't doing this. We weren't gassing people. We weren't starving people to death.
Mhm.
But Hamas and these terrorists are openly bragging and showing as much as possible on their phones and on social media the atrocities they're doing, and all the people who are backing that side need to really be held into account. It's especially Americans here who are pro this Hamas part of this war.
Yeah, and people like the Hamas caucus, as I like to call them, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. Speaking
Yeah,
of Congress people, they've got a big vote, and I do want to talk about the House Speaker Jim Jordan. I was kind of thrilled to see some of my congressmen, Mike Bost, Darren LaHood. That was one of the first couple of people I was looking for to make sure that they were voting for Jim Jordan. But
yep,
there's still some holdouts. And my
yep.
mom, she actually called me. She was like, I was watching on the news and she goes, I'm worried that Hakeem Jeffries is going to get in. And I was like, honestly, me too. That should really like wake up the Republican Party. Why do we have people in there who would be so willing to vote for a Democrat as speaker over, Jim Jordan? Because I don't know, he makes them feel bad once in a while with some of his rhetoric.
It, it's it, it's un it's yeah, I know. I mean, I'm frustrated. I was texting back and forth with a congressman. I'm not going to say who I was just asking for some insight to this, and he was saying, "Yeah, like the we don't have our eyes on the prize. The ultimate goal here is to elect a speaker, obviously, who's Republican, and move on. Like
Hmm.
this, but the longer this plays out, the more we're playing right into the Democrats' hands. They do look united. They are united. They're all behind, Hakeem Jeffries. And I have run for Congress before. I've lost. It stinks. It sucks. But when you lose, you know that you got to back the Republican who beat you, and you got to swallow your pride and do it. And unless they're a super rhino, pro-choice, like, anti-Second Amendment, open the borders Republican running against a conservative pro-life Democrat, you got to back the Republican, even if you hate that person because they were so awful to you in a primary, let's say. Everyone in Congress has run in a primary. Some of them have probably lost primaries and then won in the future. This is that same kind of situation. The guy that they backed for speaker didn't win. And what's so unfathomable is like that some of these people who backed Scalise aren't backing Jordan, but then you have people who are backing both of them, who back both. Yes, like whoever it takes, let's get him in. And the last thing I read was that he was down to 7 holdouts. And, there's been accusations of bullying, whatever that is, or like hard-nosed kind of stuff. Look, if Jordan needs to get these 7 to turn, it is going to take one-on-one conversations with those congressmen, not outside people, not whatever. And the other thing, the more important entity actually that can convince them, are constituents, of course. Here in Illinois, all 3 of our congressmen are backing Jordan. So any listeners here, they're already behind Jordan. But if you have friends in other states of a congressman who isn't on board, got to call them and say vote for Jordan. And we the longer this goes on, the worse it's going to get for us politically in the House in 2024.
Yeah. Well, we've got to take a break. Mike Coolidge, I so do appreciate you joining me, and I'm hoping that they get a vote that these 7 holdouts. But I think you're so right. They just need to get to the table, one-on-one conversation.
Bite the bullet. Hopefully, when we talk next week, we'll have a speaker.
Yeah. Well, and Mike Coolidge, tell me a little bit about the American Greatness podcast.
Yes,
you've been working on that.
YouTube, I stood up these 8 fantastic episodes. They're hosted by Dan Proft. Gad Saad is our most recent one. It's phenomenal. It was recorded right before the Israel situation started. The war started there, and it's the latest one is about how and why people don't change their opinions. Really, really interesting insight on that. Go to YouTube, search for American Greatness channel, and you can find it on Rumble too. American Greatness, awesome podcast that I'm very proud I helped stand up in these last couple months.
I love it. And this American Greatness podcast, I subscribe to the channel, so you should too. 309-451-9299. We'll be right back. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Kat. Have a great week.